And I am putting on my GM cap. Mock off season time. Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shifty's 49ers Talk. This is your boy Shifty. This one goes out to Niner fans, near, far, NFL fans, sports fans. You all are welcome here. Today, we are doing my mock offseason version 2. It's going to be a good one, and we're not going to waste any time. We're going to get right into it. Let's go. Quick note I want to throw out there, guys. This is going to be by far my longest video that I have made. So what I'm going to do is in the description below, I'm going to put in timestamps for the different aspects of the offseason that I'll be talking about. So if you want to skip ahead to like the free agents moves, if you want to skip ahead to the draft picks, feel free to check it out below. So the first thing that I want to talk about are the guys that we are going to extend, the guys who are already under contract, but we're going to give them extensions, and these are going to be big extensions. We're talking about Deebo Samuel on offense and Nick Bosa on defense. Deebo, I think, is going to get a contract somewhere in the range of about probably $20 to $22 million per year would be my guess. I'm thinking we give him a nice 5-year deal. Deebo is the ultimate weapon in the Kyle Shanahan offense. Of course, all season long, we've seen him do it all. Of course, catching the ball, I think he had about 1,400 receiving yards and a bunch of touchdowns, running with the ball, and even threw a touchdown pass. So Deebo, we have to keep him. He's young. He's a foundation of the team on offense. He is what makes the offense go, and someone that we obviously under no circumstances can let go. Still young, in the prime of his career, and just a guy that it's a no-brainer. Lock up Deebo. Now, let's move on to the defensive side, and of course, we have Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa is basically the Deebo Samuel of the defense, so he makes this defense go. He's what allows the defense to basically the schemes to work by being able to get pressure consistently with 4 guys, and Bosa being a huge part of that. It allows our other guys to drop back into coverage, prevent giving up big plays, and also force some turnovers. Of course, Bosa basically forces the quarterback into either getting sacked, having to throw the ball away, or else throwing bad passes, which lead to interceptions and what have you. So again, Bosa, really young player, drafted a couple years ago, and actually both of these guys were drafted, Bosa second overall and then Deebo in the second round back in 2019. So they are both in line for extensions. Bosa here, he's going to get a massive extension just with edge rushers. They are paid a premium in the NFL. So we're probably looking at about $30 million a year for Nick Bosa. So that's a lot of money to give to these two guys. But if you watch any 49er game, you will know just how important both of these guys are to not only the team and the play on the field, but just to like the culture of the team and what the team stands for. So no brainers, we got to do it, and happy to have these guys locked up for a long time and ideally and hopefully be 49ers for life. So we need to talk about the elephant in the room. Who's that elephant? Well, it's this guy right here, Jimmy Garoppolo. Look, we know he's going to be traded, if not traded, at the very least cut, but I would think that there will be suitors out there for Jimmy Garoppolo, considering this year's draft class at quarterback is meh compared to a lot of other years. So where will Jimmy Garoppolo get traded to? Well, that's a great question. One that we will probably find the answer out in the next month or so. I believe for a while, that the Denver Broncos are the most likely destination. Nathaniel Hackett there runs an offense kind of similar to the Shanahan offense, and Denver's basically a team that's ready to win now. And if we know anything about Garoppolo, is he can win. Say what you want about decision-making at times and things of that nature. When he plays, he wins. And obviously, Denver's a team that sorely needs that. It's been too long since they've been competitive. The other teams that come to mind are going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big Ben retires. They need a veteran quarterback, Mike Tomlin, and that Pittsburgh franchise, they don't like rebuilding. They're not into, tank a season, nothing like that. Mike Tomlin as head coach, and he's been head coach there for well over a decade, has never had a losing season, and I don't think he's about to start now. So bringing Garoppolo, he's a winner. I think they'd love him in Pittsburgh, just like his fire and passion for the game. Last but not least, and this is just a very recent development, of course, with Mike McDaniel being hired in Miami, I think that's a possible destination. So I think Miami could very well look to trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. Very familiar in that kind of offense. I don't know if the Dolphins are totally sold on Tua as their franchise quarterback. And the Dolphins, again, it's been a little while since they've really been a competitive team in terms of potentially getting to a Super Bowl. So the Dolphins have a plethora of picks the next couple of years. They send one of those back to the 49ers, and they get Jimmy Garoppolo, get a veteran guy who can win them some games, get them to the postseason, and who knows from there. Overall, what do I think we're going to get for Jimmy Garoppolo? I'm going to guess probably a second-round pick. Earlier on in my other videos, I said maybe a third, but having taken us to the NFC Championship game, even though he didn't play great by any means in the playoffs, but I just think the fact that you get your team to that stage, it's gonna be worth something. And then when you factor in what other quarterbacks have been traded for in recent years, I think a second round pick is very reasonable for Jimmy Garoppolo. For the sake of the mock, I'm gonna say he gets traded to Pittsburgh, and we in return get the 52nd overall pick, which is their second round pick. And I think Pittsburgh probably gives him like a 2 or 3 year deal, so they reduce his cap hit a little bit. But they have all those teams, basically Denver, Pittsburgh, and Miami, they all have the cap space and they all have the need a quarterback, so I think they will be calling on Jimmy G. That's going to be my prediction for this, and let's keep it going. So the next part of this video, I want to talk about guys who we want to re-sign, bring back, and these are all going to be guys who I would like to bring back on multi-year deals. Number one, it's going to be on the offense, and that's going to be left guard Laken Tomlinson. Ever since we acquired him from Detroit for, I think it was a 5th round pick, he's just been locked in, consistent, reliable. You know he's going to be there at left guard every snap. I actually believe he played 100% of the snaps this season at left guard. Laken Tomlinson, I would look to bring him back on a 3 to 4 year deal. It's probably going to average maybe about $7-8 million a year. As for Laken, do I think he's like a top 5 guard in the league? No, probably not. I would say he's closer to that, like maybe 9th or 10th overall best guard. However, again, he knows the offense inside out. He has a great rapport with Trent Williams at left tackle. Also now with Alex Mack at center. He knows what we would like to do, and he's a very good fit for what we do. So I think we reward him with a maybe an extension in about the 3 to 4 year range. Yep, about $7-8 million. Now, want to move over to the defensive side of the ball, and we're going to stick with the linemen. We're going to go with DJ Jones. If you watched any of my streams this year, you're going to know how much of a big fan I am of DJ Jones, how many plays he disrupts, whether it's against the run, even in the pass. He's just a do-it-all guy, still very young, and has a good 4 or 5 years left of prime productivity. Someone who I think that when you talk about maintaining consistency on the defense and allowing our defense to run the scheme that we need to run, he's someone who's going to be a key part, especially so far with a guy like Javon Kinlaw, who, let's be real, has been underwhelming. Obviously hurt for most of the year, so can't really blame him for that or anything, but DJ Jones is a huge part of what we do. I think he probably gets a 4-year deal as well, maybe in about the $6 million a year range. I would happily bring back DJ Jones, and I wouldn't think twice about it. Speaking of the defensive line, the next guy I want to bring back maybe on a 2 to 3 year deal, it's going to be someone that we actually brought in last year, and that's Arden Key. Again, another guy who, in my streams, watching the games, and he really came on later in the season, really excelled in that rushing from the inside, so trying to get through like the A gap and B gap. Arden Key was really, really good, really disruptive. I think he had about a stretch of about 5 or 6 games in a row where he either had a sack or a half a sack, getting multiple pressures. So I think he's someone that we really want to bring back, because if you can get pressure on the quarterback, that's something that's going to really allow our defense to feast, especially because, as you'll see later on in the draft and whatnot, I'm going to be looking to upgrade our secondary, which is sorely needed. And then that'll allow those guys to make plays by having your guys like Bosa coming back, Jones, Key, among other players already under contract, being able to get after the opposing quarterback. But really like Arden Key, I think it's probably about a 3-year deal, maybe in a $5 to $6 million range. Last but not least, it's going to be on the defense, and this one might be a little bit more controversial because he did give up a couple of touchdowns, but I really love the play of K'Wan Williams, our slot back, nickel back. I think he is really awesome, really underrated. Of course, in the playoffs, he had the interception on Dak Prescott. It was against the Rams in the NFC Championship game. A great play by K'Wan to actually basically get his hand and force the ball up, so it flipped up. Jimmy Ward picked it off. So K1, I think, is a key part of this defense. I think it can be really hard to find those nickelbacks who can, guard the slot receiver as well as he does. So I'd look to bring him back on maybe 2-3 year deal, and probably in the $3-4 million range, kind of about what he's made so far with the 49ers. But yeah, I think he's a really key part of the secondary, a secondary that we essentially need all the talent that we can get. But to sum it up, yeah, those are my guys that I want to bring back on multi-year deals. Very quickly, I want to talk about some other players that I believe we should bring back on probably 1-year deals. First off, I would offer Raheem Mostert a 1-year deal at running back. I think that we've proven that we can find production from less costly avenues, let's say. So I'd offer him a 1-year deal, but if Mostert does decide to move on with a bigger lucrative deal somewhere else, then so be it. I would also look to bring back wide receiver Trent Sherfield. I think he was very valuable on special teams. He had a couple of fumble recoveries, if I'm not mistaken. He's also a good number 4, number 5 receiver to have on the roster, knows the offense, and very good fundamentals. Ross Dwelley, someone I consider giving a 1-year contract to at tight end. Someone who, again, knows the offense pretty well, has shown that he's made some plays in the past. On a cheap 1-year deal, he might not make the final roster, but worth a shot. On the offensive line, Daniel Brunskill. Daniel Brunskill played 99.5% of the snaps last season at right guard. Now, I'm hoping that last year's second-round pick, Aaron Banks, does firmly entrench himself in that spot, but I'm thinking that Daniel Brunskill would be bringing back. He's incredibly versatile. He can play a bunch of different positions, so I think Brunskill's true value is being the primary backup at basically any position on the offensive line. We bring him back on a 1-year deal. Defensively, I'm thinking Kevin Givens on defensive tackle, and then also offering Maurice Hurst Jr. a 1-year deal too. Hurst came into the NFL with a lot of promise, had some health issues overall with the Raiders, showed some flashes, and even with us in very limited time, but I think there's no harm. He's still very young to give him another shot, a 1-year deal, and maybe he has a Arden Key-esque type season. On the secondary, I want to bring back Jaquiski Tartt at safety. It's just for a 1-year deal. I'm not looking to give him a crazy extension for a bunch of years and big money, but I would offer him a 1-year deal. I think, obviously after that crazy drop in the NFC Championship game, I think he'll have a lot to prove, but also in the draft, I'll be looking to upgrade the safety position, and I think he would be a very good mentor there and just someone that the draft pick could look up to and see how you play the game. Last but not least, I would look at cornerback Dante Johnson, who's actually been around with the 49ers for a long time, and someone, again, knows the defensive system really well, can play multiple positions inside and outside, and really stepped up in the divisional round game against the Packers. So I think we offer him a 1-year deal and see if he'll play that. Alrighty, next we are going to be talking about free agency. Who are the guys that the 49ers will look to bring in to add some talent and depth to this team? Well, overall, the 49ers will not have that much money to work with. We're not going to be huge spenders by any means. However, couple of guys that I want to look at to bring in. Number 1 is going to be quarterback Tyrod Taylor. Of course, with Jimmy Garoppolo departing via trade, we need a veteran backup for Trey Lance, and I think Tyrod is the perfect guy to bring in for him. Of course, he has familiarity with our new assistant head coach, Anthony Lynn, but not only that, he is just a professional, Tyrod Taylor. Also a guy who you feel like could come in, in a couple of games and actually win you games. He's not going to be a complete liability or anything like that. So should Trey happen to miss any time, hopefully he doesn't. I think Tyrod could come in, again, fill in pretty admirably for a few games and would do very well. So I'm looking at Tyrod Taylor about 1 year, maybe about $4 or $5 million. Moving on from that, this one's going to be an interesting one, and actually a signing that I would be very excited about would be wide receiver Braxton Berrios, who's played with the Jets for a number of years. This guy would actually solve a lot of issues on the team. Something we talked about before, and at the time of recording, we don't have a special teams coordinator, but Braxton Berrios, number 1 in kick return yardage in the NFL last year, number 5 in punt returns, also a very, very, very good slot receiver. When I see Braxton Berrios, and not just because of their size or something like that, but I really think of a guy like Trent Taylor before Trent Taylor got hurt. Berrios is just been in the New York Jets offense the last year. Of course, that's the Mike LaFleur offense, which was basically the same thing as the Shanahan offense. So he'd be very familiar with our offensive scheme. And he's a guy who can really beat those one-on-one matchups in man coverage, which is a huge part of our offense. And also he mixes it up on third down. I think he's a guy where you could, gives us depth, but also on third down when you have guys like, let's say, Berrios and Jawan, you have Ayuk, Debo, and then maybe you have Kittle or something. There's just so many guys who are so versatile, are great against man coverage, that I think it would really benefit Trey Lance to have another guy. I don't think Berrios would necessarily break the bank, but the biggest thing is obviously the Jets would like to bring him back, and they will have more money to work with. But if Berrios maybe wants to go to a situation where he's more likely to win, I think San Francisco is the way to go for him. Next thing, last but not least, I want to bring in a veteran cornerback. So there's a bunch of actually guys that I've been looking at, and I'm going to settle on, his name is Fabian Moreau, played with the Falcons. He's been around the league for about 5 years, 28 years old, played a bunch last year. Look, this guy's not going to be he's not like a Pro Bowler or anything like that, but I believe our starting tandem going forward is going to be Emmanuel Moseley and Ambry Thomas, potentially Emmanuel Moseley and the draft pick that I'm going to show you later. But Moreau would be someone who is still relatively young, about 28, and has still maybe some room for growth, but also someone who would be maybe our 4th or 5th cornerback. So wouldn't be playing a bunch of snaps, but is someone who has starting experience. I'm not completely sold on Moreau, so I could be definitely talked into some other players, other guys that I were looking at that are about that same age, who've been in the league for about the same amount of time, who maybe just need a change of scenery, a la Arden Key, going from the Raiders to the 49ers, who could do the same thing but for our secondary. I'm looking at Kevin King, who played for the Packers. I'm looking at Sidney Jones, who's bounced around a little bit, but last year played with the Seahawks. And then I'm also looking at Isaiah Oliver for the Falcons too. These are all guys who were drafted relatively high a few years ago, and maybe a change of scenery would do them well for their career, and especially coming into a really solid defense coached by DeMeco Ryans. But yeah, those are the guys I'm looking at in free agency. Alrighty, it is mock draft time. Let's get into it. We are going to start off in the second round. Pick number 52 overall, acquired from trading Jimmy G to the Steelers. So pick number 52, I am going to upgrade our secondary, and I'm going to pick Kyler Gordon, the cornerback out of Washington. Why Kyler Gordon? Well, here's the thing. In college, he played in both zone and man coverage, which is what the 49ers do. Although we primarily play zone defense, Kyler Gordon excels in that. He had 2 interceptions last season, but one of my favorite things as well that he does, which is absolutely necessary in this defense, is he's a really good, strong, willing tackler. So a lot of times in this defense, we'll give up the 3 or 4 yard pass as long as our cornerbacks can get up and make the tackle to prevent a big play. Not only that, but obviously we need to stop the run as well, especially to the edge, and having willing tacklers like Kyler Gordon is going to be something that's necessary and asked of any cornerback in this DeMeco Ryans defense. I think he is someone who could ultimately be a starter on the outside. He does have versatility though, where he can play inside. So for example, in my mock here, maybe we give K'Wan Williams a 2-year deal should he get hurt or should anything happen even after that deal. Then maybe Kyler Gordon slips into that nickelback role. If not, and if he excels on the outside, then hey, all the better, and we have great depth. But Kyler Gordon, second round, number 52 overall. With our other pick in the second round, that's 61 overall, I am going to stick with the secondary because we need a lot of work there, especially playmaking ability. And I'm going to be taking Jalen Petrie, the safety, out of Baylor. This is a guy who is a turnover machine. When you look at his last 2 years combined, 4 interceptions, 4 fumbles forced. That's 8 turnovers in 2 years. I can't tell you how many turnovers Tart has had in the last number of years, even though I'm a fan of Jaquiski Tart. But Petrie, a guy who actually would be perfect in that strong safety role, the role that Tart currently has held for a number of years. And I think given a year where he can learn the defense, he could really just explode onto the scene in 2023. Also has a ton of experience lining up in a bunch of different positions across the defense. So he has that definitely the mental aspect of the game down. But I think he would come in, excel, and add a playmaking ability to the safety position. Obviously, we needed that in the NFC Championship game, but regardless, getting some more production in terms of turnovers from our secondary is going to be key, and I think Petrie will help significantly in that regard. In the third round, number 93 overall, I'm going to be drafting edge rusher Sam Williams out of Ole Miss. This is a guy who has a ton of productivity in a very tough conference, the SEC. Last season alone, he had 12 and a half sacks. The 2 seasons combined before that, he had 10. So he's not necessarily a one-hit wonder. Huge productivity, someone who has improved as a pass rusher, obviously, in college. But not only that, I think someone who has a pretty good get-off, but also has excellent size for the position, something that we would really covet. Now, here's the thing. Whenever it comes to drafting defensive linemen, we really have a great coach in Kasurek, so I'd love to think that he's someone who could get the most out of Williams, and you just love the productivity. He's relentless, which a lot of times he will be the guy who'll get those effort sacks when the quarterback's running around. We have a bunch of guys in the division who do that, like Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray. So him being the guy who's just absolutely relentless, I think he'll pick up sacks that way, and I think he'd be a really solid pick in the third round. Don't worry, there are offensive picks coming. So there we go, third round pick, Sam Williams. So with our compensatory pick that we received for Mike McDaniel being hired by the Miami Dolphins, I will be selecting Alec Lindstrom, the center out of Boston College, third round. I believe it should be pick number 102 overall. Alec Lindstrom is actually brothers of Chris Lindstrom, who is drafted by the Atlanta Falcons a couple years back, so definitely has that football pedigree in the family. But not only that, I think Alec Lindstrom is the perfect fit for our offense. He is a guy who will take maybe a year or two, I would say maybe even just 1 year to develop in terms of getting the strength down, in terms of being able to handle NFL nose tackles and defensive tackles, but more so getting the responsibilities of a center down, being able to make all the adjustments, all the calls for the offensive line, and I think he could potentially have the great mentor in Alex Mack. So Alex Mack has maybe hinted at possible retirement. Hopefully he will be convinced to come back for 1 more year. We get Lindstrom to learn from Mack, and then in 2023 he just seamlessly steps in as the starting center, and I think he would excel with a year under his belt to learn the offense and improve his strength. In the fourth round, I'm going to stick with the offensive side of the ball, and I'm looking at tight end Cole Turner out of Nevada. Here's a guy. He is 6'6", 240. Also a guy who has excellent just straight line speed. He's not the most athletic guy. He's not necessarily like a George Kittle, where Kittle has better change of direction and things of that nature, but Turner is someone who really battles, really fights for those extra yards, which we know is so key in this type of offense where you break a tackle and bam, you could be gone, just the way that Shanahan sets up plays. Now, is he a great blocker, Turner? Not the best, but he is willing, so at least there's a possibility where he can really develop his game there and become solid. I think he would be a guy who would excel, especially early on in his career, when we have those 2 tight end sets where if you have maybe you have, let's say, Elijah Mitchell in the backfield and you have Kittle, Turner, and then Debo, Ayuk or something like that out there, where he's maybe the forgotten man, and then bam, all of a sudden with his straight line speed, he's taking it to the house. Someone who I think would be great value in the 4th round, and also someone with his size and his ability to track the ball. I think he'd be a really good red zone weapon on maybe some fade passes, things of that nature, but a really good pick. I think he would be in the 4th round. So I am going to go through the 6th and 7th round picks very quickly here. In the 6th round, we have one pick, and I'm going to be taking Bubba Bolden, the safety out of Miami. He's a guy, he had some off-the-field issues a few years ago, also tore his Achilles in 2019. However, he bounced back really well. In 2020, was the runner-up for the Jim Thorpe Award, which is really impressive. He has great size, great speed, great athleticism, and at this point in the draft, definitely worth the risk, in my opinion, considering we need help at the safety position. In the 7th round, we have 3 picks. They're all compensatory picks. So here's the deal. With the first one, I'm going to take Christopher Allen, the edge player from Alabama. I love taking guys from big schools and big programs at this point in the draft. He's a senior, so he's got 4 years of experience with Nick Saban's coaching staff, things of that nature. So at this point, he's someone who could maybe develop. And at this point in the draft, we're looking at the 7th round. You're just like hoping for a bit of a long shot. Second of the compensatory picks in the 7th round, I'm going to take Darrell Baker Jr., the cornerback from Georgia Southern, which is actually the same school that former 49er running back Matt Breida went to. But Darrell Baker, he's a guy who's incredibly willing to tackle and be physical, and his passion for the game is second to none, so you just can't teach that. Does he need refining and development in his defensive back skills, like in terms of zone coverage and knowing concepts and things of that nature? Of course, but again, this is why he's a 7th round pick. But that passion and that physicalness, you cannot teach that. So love the pick here of Baker in the 7th round. Then we're going to round it off with basically Mr. Irrelevant of the draft, and I'm going to be taking C.J. Verdell, the running back from Oregon, someone who could very well just be another Shanahan late round pick / undrafted guy who just comes in and is incredibly effective as a player and just does really well in our zone blocking scheme. That's what he ran at Oregon, and that's a thing where I think he could excel the most at, and we've just shown the ability, this coaching staff, to get great production out of late round picks. So I think that would be really worth taking a shot at CJ Verdell here, especially if we're unable to bring back guys like Raheem Mostert or Jeff Wilson Jr. So that's about going to wrap it up for the draft. And guys, let me know what you think about my picks. Let me know some of your guys' thoughts on draft picks or free agency down below in the comments. And guys, I'm going to say 2 things. The butt counts, and I'm going to catch you on the flip side.